Hey guys, it's Lukian, and today I am going to be doing another reading wrap-up for 2024, and today I'm going to be discussing all of the books that I read in the months of June and July. In the last couple of years, I have not actually read a ton in the summer, and I think it's just because I'm trying to hang out with my friends as much as possible in between school years, and it's just I want to be outside and do things, and I don't really, I'm not in my house as much, so I'm not reading as much, and just a whole thing. But I did get some books read in June and July, and I'm excited to talk about them all with you and share my thoughts. So the first book that I read in the month of June was The Mirror of Beasts by Alexandra Bracken. I actually received an e-arc of this book from the publisher, so thank you so much to them. And this is the sequel to Silver and the Bone, which was one of my favorite books of last year, and it is the conclusion to this duology. This series follows a girl named Tamsin, who is a part of this guild of people in our world in present day that search for artifacts that are from legend, and I think it was 7 years ago. Tamsin and her brother's caretaker disappeared, and in present day, Tamsin is trying to figure out a way to break the curse on her brother where he turns into a hound, and she finds out that there is an artifact from Arthurian legend called the Ring of Dispel, and in order to find it, she and a few other characters go on a journey through the mystic Isle of Avalon. The catch is that Avalon is not as it is depicted in many stories, and there's actually something very dark happening in the Isle, and Tamsin has to get to the bottom of it while also trying to figure out a way to save her brother. So The Mirror of Beasts picks up off of a very intense cliffhanger from Silver and the Bone, and it just gets going immediately. This is definitely going to be a favorite book of the year for me. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I think it was an amazing sequel. It really just brought all of the things I loved from Silver and the Bone and improved upon it, which I didn't even think was possible because I loved Silver and the Bone so much, and this is also just a really amazing contained story in and of itself. The two books are quite different in nature. They both kind of deal with a quest at the heart of them, but they just have very different vibes, and I really appreciated that, so I definitely loved this book. I thought the plot was so engaging and fun, and I really could not put this book down while I was reading it. It was just, there was always something exciting happening at every turn. I loved the new aspects of Arthurian legend that we saw in this book, and I really liked getting to see the characters develop, and I just love Alexandra Bracken's writing as well, so it's always fun to read one of her books and be immersed in one of her worlds. So yeah, if you have not read this duology, I would definitely recommend it, especially if you love folklore and mythology and contemporary fantasy as well, and just a really fun group of characters that are going on a mythical quest to try to break curses and, all that fun fantasy stuff. I really hope that Alexandra Bracken continues writing in this world because there's a lot of opportunity for short stories set in this universe, so I hope that she decides to come back in the future, but I'm very excited for what she writes next. After that, I picked up a book that has been sitting on my TBR for 4 years, and that was Incendiary by Zoraida Córdova. I unfortunately did not love this book. I ended up giving it 2 out of 5 stars, and this is it's a fantasy, it's the first book in a fantasy duology, and it follows a girl named Renata, and she is a part of this group of people that have magic, and it's sort of inspired by the Spanish Inquisition. The reason why I'm struggling to summarize this is because I really have not thought about it since I closed the book. This book is 450 pages long, and it was a slog to get through. I originally gave it 3 stars because I liked the ending of it, but when I reflected on the book as a whole, I just could not condone giving it 3 stars, so I lowered it to 2, and I will probably be unhauling it at some point just because it was really disappointing. I'd been looking forward to it for a while because I had heard that it was a fantasy-inspired Spanish Inquisition situation, and I liked the idea of the magic system. It has a lot to do with like memories, and there's a bunch of different magic users. I did think that was interesting, but I just don't feel like it was fleshed out enough or a big enough part of the story. A lot of this deals with Zoraida. A lot of this deals with Renata kind of in this castle. She's like in captivity. And another feeling that I just could not shake while I was reading this book was that it felt like the second book in a series. Like, I needed a lot more backstory. This kind of just throws you in, and you're supposed to understand character dynamics and the world and the magic system. And Renata kind of has a whole history before this book that is interesting enough for a novel itself. So I think this would have been a good middle book in a series where I already know the characters and the world and like the backstories and everything. But as the first book in a series, as an introduction, it just really let me down. So yeah. Then I received another arc. I read Death at Morning House by Maureen Johnson. This is a standalone mystery novel that follows a girl named Marlowe who, after a series of unfortunate events, ends up deciding to go to this place called Morning House, which is up in the lakes of New York, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. The only thing about Morning House is that in the 1900s, in the early 1900s, this very rich family lived there, and there were a couple of deaths associated with the house. So now it is like a tourist attraction, and Marlowe decides to work there for the summer, and she begins to uncover some of the mysteries regarding the house and its history. I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was like a fun read. I love the Truly Devious series by Maureen Johnson. It's one of my favorites of all time, and I was really excited for this one because it's another mystery, and it kind of has a similar vibe where there's like a murder in the past, or like a death in the past, and someone in the present trying to figure it out. So I really enjoy that aspect of the book, and I just thought it was a really interesting story overall. It didn't feel like a full 5 out of 5 stars to me. There wasn't anything the book did like wrong or anything. It was just, not one of my absolute favorites for the year. I really liked Marlowe as like a person, as a character. I thought she was really funny. It's told from her first person point of view, and I just liked getting insight into her life, and she's really funny. She definitely has a humorous internal monologue. But I do wish she had a little bit more agency. Like, the Truly Devious series follows Stevie, who is like she wants to be a detective. So she's really determined to figure out the, solution to the mysteries. But Marlowe is kind of tugged along, so it felt like she had less drive to actually get to the bottom of things. So that was like really my only complaint, but overall I thought the characters were fun. I liked the setting. The writing was really effervescent and enjoyable, and I would definitely recommend it if you're looking for a short standalone mystery. Then I picked up The One and Only Family by Katherine Applegate. This is the 4th and final book in the One and Only series. I started reading the series when I was in like 4th grade, so I just read it every time a new book comes out, and this was a nice conclusion. It's told from Ivan's perspective again, and I really liked it. I thought it was cute, and definitely very satisfying, so I give it 4 out of 5 stars, and definitely one of my favorite children's or middle grade series. Then I was really on like an arc kick. I was getting approved for a lot of arcs, so the next book that I read was Heir by Sabaa Tahir. This is the first book in a new duology that is a spin-off to the Ember and the Ashes series, which is, again, one of my favorite series of all time. I love it so much. I've read the first 3 books twice, and then the finale is like one of my favorite finales ever. So I have really fond memories of reading that series, and I love the world and the characters, and this takes place 20 years after the events of A Sky Beyond the Storm. And this follows 3 different perspectives. I'm not going to go into it too much because I don't really know what gets into spoiler territory, but basically they all have different missions, and they're all in like different parts of the world, and their stories somehow become intertwined. And we do get some cameos from the like original characters, so like Laya and Elias and Helene and all the faves, so that was really enjoyable, and I liked getting to see this world 20 years in the future, and getting to see how it develops and how things are going after the conclusion of the original quartet. I do always love a quest, and there are definitely like some quests in this story which I found really engaging, and by the end, like, all of the characters were left in really interesting places, so I'm super pumped for the sequel and finale whenever that comes out. And yeah, the writing was really great as well. This is told in third person, whereas the Ember series is told in first person, so you definitely get to see a little bit more of Sabaa Tahir's lyrical writing skills, and I just thought it was a good return, and I'm excited for some other people to read it. Then I picked up Fatebreaker by Victoria Aveyard. This is the third and final book in the Realmbreaker trilogy, which I've been reading since it came out, and I really enjoyed it. I read Realmbreaker the year it came out, and then Bladebreaker the following year when that one released. And in between that, reading Bladebreaker and Fatebreaker, I actually read the entire Red Queen series by Victoria Aveyard and really, really loved it. I actually bought it all. I don't know if you can, yeah, it's that shelf right there. It's kind of covered by these pillows, but that became a new favorite series of mine, so I was definitely very motivated to finally see how this story wraps up. And this series is very difficult to explain, but it follows a bunch of characters. I think there's like 6 POV characters, and they are basically like the JV team of saving the world from this guy who wants to open these portals that used to exist in the realm that lead to other worlds, but have been closed for centuries, and this guy's trying to reopen them and like letting these monsters into the realm that they live in called Allward, and they are trying to stop him from utter domination. This book I gave 5 out of 5 stars. One of my favorites of the year. I just really loved the progression of the plot. I thought the ending, like the final chapter, was an amazing send-off. I loved all of the characters. I appreciated their journeys so much in this last installment. I thought it was like the perfect, like each one had a perfect journey, and this had so many twists and turns, as you would expect from a Victoria Aveyard novel, and the world in this series is just one of my favorites ever. Like, I think it's so detailed. I mean, like, look at this map. Like, I could literally sit here for hours and hours just analyzing this map, and the world definitely expands even more in this book. There's a lot of political intrigue, which I really enjoyed, and then, of course, a big battle, which Victoria Aveyard always knocks out of the park. So, if you're looking for a really immersive YA fantasy that definitely has some like adult epic fantasy crossover, I would absolutely recommend Realmbreaker, because it's just super immersive with tons of great characters and an extremely expansive, immersive world. Then the next 3 books that I read actually bled into July a little bit, but I read the Legacy of Orisha trilogy. I actually reread the first 2 books and then read the finale, which just came out in June, so I'm going to talk a little bit about each installment individually. So, Children of Blood and Bone, this was my 3rd time reading the book, and actually my favorite time. I think that I just have matured a lot since I first read this series, and I've read a lot of epic fantasy, and I'm also just like a more educated individual, so I was able to really appreciate the themes and messages in this book even more, and I was able to analyze it a little bit better, and I just loved the story. It's so fast-paced. Like, I read 200 pages in one sitting at one point towards the middle of the book, and it's just so captivating. I think this is an amazing debut. It was, like, no wonder it was such a blockbuster, right? Like, it is a fantastic fantasy. The world is utterly captivating and immersive and inviting, and the characters are just so well developed. And I love the writing as well. I think the magic system is so cool and unique. So this is definitely one of my favorite books of all time. I just loved it, and I was so impressed with my reread. Then Children of Virtue and Vengeance was not as good. I originally gave it 3 stars when I read it the first time, but on reread I raised it to 4 because I could kind of understand what the author was going for, and I just appreciated some things a little bit more, and I think reading it right after Children of Blood and Bone helped me enjoy it a little bit more because I could see where the story was going. and being able to also jump right into the third book helped as well. And then Children of Anguish and Anarchy, the third and final book. I was originally planning on doing a review for it, but I think I'm actually just going to talk about it now, and I might be including spoilers, so if you don't want to hear any spoilers for the finale of the Legacy of Orisha series, just mute until I put the book down. So this was an interesting finale. It was very, very short. I think it's like it's just over 350 pages. And I think that definitely was like a detriment to the story. I gave it 4 stars, but in retrospect it's more of like a 3.5. I think the same goes for Children of Virtue and Vengeance, honestly. But this was just like good. It's very, very, very disconnected from the conflicts in the other 2 books, and I think character arcs were not amazing in the story. Like, there's a lot of flip-flopping between, like, Nahanda, which is, like, who is, oh my god, Inan and Amari's mother. And, I don't know. I liked it. It wasn't my favorite. And I think that the conflict just seems very disjointed from the ones in Blood and Bone and Virtue and Vengeance. I do think it was a good story, though, and I liked the ending. Even if it was very, very rushed, I think this would have been good. Like, if this was just an installment in the series, I think it would have been interesting, but it just felt a little bit all over the place for me, and I don't think as a finale it was all that satisfying, especially since we waited like 4 years for this book to come out. So, not my favorite, but I do think it was a good read. You know, the writing was good, I like the world still, and I do like the characters, but just not an entirely satisfying send-off for the characters. Next, I reread Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is a story that follows a woman named Carrie Soto. I know, what a shock. And at the start of the story, she is a retired tennis player. She's 37 years old, but when she entered her career, she was considered the greatest of all time. She had the most Grand Slam singles titles in history, and she was just known as the best ever. However, her reputation was also a little bit sour. She was known as the Battle Axe. She was not very sunny all of the time, which definitely rubbed people the wrong way, especially in the time that she was playing in the 70s and 80s. And when the story begins, she is at the US Open, and she watches a tennis player named Nikki Chan equal Carrie's record. And so she decides that she's going to come out of retirement and make a comeback and see if she can reclaim her record and prove that she is the best of all time. So I always love to reread this book because it's one of my favorites and I love it so much, and I also really love tennis. It's like one of my favorite hobbies. I've been playing it since I was a little kid, and I definitely started playing more seriously my freshman year of college, so because I joined the club team, so it's definitely become a larger part of my life. I love watching tennis. I am always keeping track of the current tournaments and everything, and so I thought I would have an even greater appreciation for this story this time around, and again, I just loved it so much. It's so compulsively readable. Like, if you need a book to grip you from page 1 until the end, pick up Carrie Soto's Back, because it is just so engrossing, and you will forget everything around you if you just start diving into this book. It's so fun to read, and it has a lot of meaningful messages as well. So yeah, even if you don't like tennis, even if you don't like sports, I think there's a lot to glean from this novel about being a woman in the public eye and all that sort of stuff. So I would definitely recommend it, and it's one of my favorite books ever. Then I went on vacation and I wasn't reading a ton, but I did manage to read one book, and that was Funny Story by Emily Henry. This is really hard to explain, but it follows 2 characters. Well, it follows one character, one character's perspective, and that is Daphne, and she, very close to her wedding, she found out from her boyfriend that he was going to break up with her and be with his childhood best friend, Petra, And so Daphne has no idea what to do, she has nowhere to live, so she decides to live with Petra's ex-boyfriend. They're kind of in the same boat, and they just live with each other, they don't really interact with each other, they don't bother each other, but then, you know, it's a romance, so you can obviously guess probably what's going to happen. And I really enjoyed this book. I give it 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was a really cute romance. I love Emily Henry. I will read anything she writes. And I thought this was really enjoyable. It definitely deals a lot with other things besides romance, like Daphne's job and her family and things like that, so I really liked that. There was a little bit of a seed planted in the beginning about like fake dating, and I was expecting a little bit more of that throughout the book, so I kind of had to reorient my expectations while I was reading, but I did still really enjoy it, and I am excited for whatever Emily Henry writes next, because I just thought this was really fun, and definitely a super good vacation read. It takes place during the summer, actually. I think in Michigan, if I'm not mistaken, so like around like Lake Michigan, those sorts of beaches and stuff, so it's a fun summer read, and I just really liked Daphne a lot. I thought she was a fun main character, and I definitely enjoyed the romance between her and Miles, and just like the aspect of, like, it is definitely a funny story, and just the way that they ended up like in each other's lives was enjoyable as well. Also, this book gets extra brownie points for mentioning Richmond. That's where Daphne used to live, and I go to school in Richmond. I go to the University of Richmond, so it was just fun to like see that in the book. So yeah, definitely a good romance book, and I can't wait to have a physical copy when it comes out in paperback, because I have all of Emily Henry's other books in paperback, and I don't want to stray away from that format. Okay, and the final book that I read in July was Dark Star Burning, Ash Falls White by Amélie Zhao. This is the sequel to Song of Silver, Flame Like Night, which is a fantasy inspired by ancient China, and it deals a lot with Chinese mythology, including the tortoise, phoenix, dragon, and tiger, so that's like a big aspect of the story. And I mentioned when I talked about the first book in this duology how like jam-packed it is, like that felt like it could have been 2 books, and this one also felt like it could have been 2 books, so I think this would have made for an amazing quartet. But even as a duology, I did really enjoy it, and I actually liked this book even more. So much so that I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, so this definitely cemented this duology as a favorite of mine. I really, really loved this story. It was so engaging. I definitely appreciated that it was shorter, because another main complaint that I had with Song of Silver, Flame Like Night was that it felt so long. But this one was action-packed from beginning to end. I loved both of the perspectives in this book, Lan and Zen's, and each of their stories was so interesting, and I love the way that the world expanded in this series. I adore the magic system in this duology. It deals a lot with balance and like ki, and I love the incorporation of the Chinese mythology. I thought that was really interesting, and the way that this book ended solidified it as a 5-star read, because originally I was like, okay, it's a 4-star, but the ending really caught me by surprise in like a good way, which I think well, in and of itself, for me to be surprised after having read like 800 fantasy books in my life, I think is a feat, but it was like pleasantly surprising, because I was like, oh, I was really not expecting the author to go there, but I really enjoyed it. So that was like not a very eloquent discussion of my thoughts on this book, but I did really love it, and I can't wait for Amélie Zhao's next book. I believe that one also deals with a lot of Chinese mythology, so I am excited to see what the magic system in that one is like, and which parts of the folklore she decides to engage with, because the parts that she decided to focus on in this duology were really, really interesting and exciting. So yeah, definitely a great duology if you're looking for one that's action-packed from beginning to end. Dual perspective as well. Great romance, great side characters, a fascinating world, and a really cool magic system based on ancient Chinese mythology. But that is it for the books that I read in June and July. I would love to know what books you all read in the month, and also any of your thoughts on the ones that I just mentioned. But that is it for this video. I really hope you all enjoyed. All of my social media links are in the description box below, and I'll see you soon for a new video. Bye!